And he's going to mention 10 things that help you protect your mind. Why you should be mindful of what you are thinking. And why, if you are having impure and harmful and destructive thoughts, you need to stop and change the way that you think before those thoughts become statements and actions. Because so long as they are thoughts, inshallah ta'ala, for the most part, you will not be taken to task for them and held accountable for them. This is not ala itlaqi, however. This is not unrestricted. Because from the greatest of the major sins is su'adhan billah. But generally, how a person thinks when they don't take control over their mind and their ego and so on and so forth, it is going to become statements and is going to become actions. It's going to be actionable thoughts that a person carries out, at which point they are responsible in front of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala for their thoughts. And so, a person can stop that by, and he's safeguarding their thoughts. Before reading these 10 things, then we'll mention the second thing, inshallah ta'ala, which is that a person has sidq at-ta'ahub, ay al-isti'adad, li yawmi ma'adi. That a person, after getting control over their thoughts, that they take the second step, after making sure that their thoughts are how a Muslim should think, which is to have proper belief about Allah and proper understanding of one's religion and proper intention and that sort of thing. Then they do the next step, which is to genuinely, sincerely, with vigor and energy, prepare to meet Allah. That they prepare to meet Allah, Tabarak wa Ta'ala. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, وَالْحَذَرْ كُلَ الْحَذَرْ مِنْ أَحْمَانِهَا وَالسِّرْسَالِ مَعَهَا. A person must be extremely cautious against neglecting their thoughts and getting carried away by their fleeting thoughts. And if something comes from the waswas of the shaitan, from the hawajis of the nafs, and from the whisperings of the shaitan, or from the whisperings of his nafs, the impulses of his nafs, and he starts to think about them, he must be extremely cautious against neglecting his thoughts and getting carried away by his thoughts and his imagination. فَإِنَّ أَصْلَ الْفَسَادِ كُلِّهِ مِنْ قِبَلِهَا يَجِيءُ. فَإِنَّ أَصْلَ الْفَسَادِ كُلِّهِ مِنْ قِبَلِهَا يَجِيءُ. He says, for indeed the root and the core cause of all corruption comes from the direction of a person's thoughts. لِأَنَّهَا هِيَ بَذْرُ الشَّيْطَانِ وَالنَّفْسِ فِي أَرْضِ الْقَلْبِ. Because the thoughts of a person are the seeds of both the shaitan and the inner self upon the soil of the heart. So they can corrupt the shajaratul iman, the tree of faith in his heart. The faith in his heart can be corrupted by these harmful weeds and these harmful parasites and these harmful pests and so on and so forth that are planted by his nafs and the shaitan upon the soil of his heart, that go directly against what Allah has revealed in the book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. One is going to have to give way. And so his thoughts, they are the seeds that are planted by his nafs that orders him with evil, his inner self that commands him with evil, and by the shaitan on the soil of his heart. He says, فَإِذَا تَمَكَنَ بَذْرُهَا تَآهَدَهَا الشَّيْطَانُ بِسَقْيِهِ مَرَّةً بَعْدَ أُخْرَى حَتَّى تَصِيرَ إِرَادَاتٍ. He says, when these seeds take root, when they start to sprout and take root in that soil, when these thoughts start to take root in his heart and his mind, and the shaitan tends to them. The shaitan comes to the person saying that this person has accepted these harmful thoughts, and he starts to tend to these destructive plants in his heart by watering them again and again with whisperings and so on and so forth until they become iradat, until they become intentions, until he starts to intend to carry out these thoughts, to act upon what he is imagining. ثُمَّ يَسْقِيهَا حَتَّى تَصِيرَ عَزَائِمْ. Then he continues to water them until they become his resolve, his resolutions. ثُمَّ لَا يَزَالُ بِهَا حَتَّى تُثْمِرُ الْأَعْمَالِ. And then he does not stop until they bear actions, until they turn and to a person's statements and their actions. ولا ريب أن دفع الخواتر أيسر من دفع الإرادات والعزائم. There's no doubt that a person pushing away and repelling fleeting thoughts, any thoughts that just pass through the mind real quickly, is easier to stop those thoughts than repelling his desires and his resolutions and his determinations. فيجد العبد نفسه عاجزا أو كالعاجز عن دفعها بعد أن صارت إرادة جازمة. The servant finds that when they have become firm intention within his heart to act upon, then he is unable or nearly unable. He feels that it is impossible to stop himself. وهو المفرط إذ لم يدفعها وهي خاطر ضعيف. And he was the one who was negligent because he didn't stop himself. He did not repel these thoughts when they were just weak, fleeting thoughts that passed through his mind. كمن تهاون بشرارة من النار ومن نار وقعت في حطب يابس. He says this is like a person who disregarded a spark of fire that fell upon dry wood. And a person, they see sparks of fire falling upon dry wood and they say it's not a big deal. I don't see any fire yet. So he sees sparks falling upon dry wood. This is how these thoughts are in his mind. If he disregards them, then there is going to be a bonfire soon. It's going to be a bonfire soon. فَلَمَّا تَمَكَّنَتْ مِنْهُ عَجَزَ عَنْ إِطْفَائِهَا. And when the fire overtakes the wood, a person finds he is unable to extinguish it. And in the same way, once these ideas and once these thoughts become a fire in his heart, he finds that it is very impossible, or that he feels that he is unable to extinguish it, to stop the fire. فَإِن قُلْتَ. So if you ask, فَمَا الطَّرِيقُ إِلَى حِفْظِ الْخَوَاتِرِ قُلْتُ أَسْبَابٌ عِدَّةٌ. He says, so if you ask, what is the path to preserving one's thoughts? And I will say there are several means. And many of these things go right back to the main topic, which is the athar of aqidah sahiha, al-iman billah, al-ghaybiyat, ala al-qalbi wal-akhlaq. And the effects of a person's belief about Allah tabarak wa ta'ala upon his heart. So how does a person safeguard their thoughts? He said, then I would say in response to that, that there are several asbabun iddah. There are several means to safeguard your thoughts. أحدها, the first, العلم الجازم باطلاع الرب تبارك وتعالى ونظره إلى قلبك وعلمه بتفسير خواترك, is that you have decisive knowledge, unmistakable, certain knowledge that Allah is watching, that Allah sees you, that Allah is watching, and that Allah is looking upon your heart. This comes in the well-known hadith, in Allah tabarak wa ta'ala la yanzuru ila suwarikum amwalikum. Allah, I made my week. Alhamdulillah, the children unanimously finished the hadith. Indeed, Allah is not looking at your appearances or your money and your property. He looks at your hearts, and He looks at your amal. He looks at your deeds. He looks at your deeds. So a person knows that Allah looks at his heart. That Allah tabarak wa ta'ala la yakhfa alayhi shay'un fil ardi wa la fis sama'. There's nothing hidden to Allah in the heavens nor in the earth. And He knows, that Allah ya'lamu ma fi anfusikum fahdharuhu. Allah knows what is happening in your nafs, in yourself, in your inner self. So be careful and cautious about Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. So a person knows that Allah is watching, that Allah is looking upon your heart, and He knows the details of your thoughts. Athani haya'uka min. The second of the 10 things that help you get your thoughts under control is your modesty and your shyness of Allah. To be shy of Allah. To be shy that Allah sees anything in this bait in this house, which is your heart, that Allah has created لِمَعْرِفَتِهِ وَمَحَبَّتِهِ, for you to know Him and love Him. Anything لَا يَلِيقُ أَن يُسَاكِنْ هَذِهِ الْمَعْرِفَةِ وَهَذِهِ الْمَحَبَّةِ, as Ibn Qayyim mentions elsewhere. That a person should be shy to let anything cohabitate in his heart that Allah has created, this heart that Allah has created to know Him and love Him. Anything that goes against that knowledge of who Allah is and the love that they have for Allah, it should be shy of Allah. It should be shy of Allah, Tabarak wa Ta'ala. الثالث, the third, إجلالك له أن يرى مثل تلك الخواتر في بيته الذي خلقه لمعرفته ومحبته. He mentions almost what I just mentioned. Verbatim here. The third thing is your reverence for Allah, your ijlal of Allah, which is the same as ta'zeem. Ijlal, ta'zeem, all these things are the same meaning. And your ijlal of Allah, your reverence for Allah, and your recognition of the grandeur and greatness and magnificence of Allah, Tabarak wa Ta'ala, that He would see such thoughts in His house, meaning your heart, that He created so that it may know Allah and love Allah. A person should have more respect for Allah, Tabarak wa Ta'ala, than allowing those things to settle in his heart. الرابع خوفك منه أن تسقط من عينه بتلك الخواتر. Your fear of Him, that you might fall from His favor due to having these thoughts. Person says that these thoughts that I have, perhaps they may cause my daraja to decrease, my standing with Allah, my level with Allah to fall. Al-Khamis, the fifth, إيثارك له أن يساكن قلبك غير محبته. And he is at your preference for Allah, so that nothing other than His love should inhabit your heart, which is what we took in the first passage. That you put your love of Allah in front of the love of everything else. That you give إيثارك له, that you give preference for Allah, so that nothing other than His love should inhabit your heart, that nothing other than that should cohabitate in your heart alongside your love for Allah, Tabarak wa Ta'ala. السادس, the sixth, خشيتك أن تتولد تلك الخواتر ويستعر شرارها فتأكل ما في القلب من الإيمان ومحبة الله وتذهب به جملة وأنت لا تشعر. أعوذ بالله من الخذلان. He said the sixth, your fear that these thoughts might breed other thoughts, and that the sparks of these thoughts intensify, causing a fire in your heart that consumes what exists in your heart of iman, belief and faith, and mahabba and love for Allah, Tabarak wa Ta'ala, وَتَذْهَبَ بِهِ جُمْلَةً, taking it all away from you, وَأَنْتَ لَا تَشْعُرُ, without you even realizing. Without you even realizing. Person is afraid. So stated by many of the scholars in the past. Was stated by Abu Yusuf al-Khawlani, the Salaf, كانوا يخافون النفاق على أنفسهم. Used to fear nifaq for themselves. Used to fear nifaq for themselves. It was stated by Abu Yusuf al-Khawlani, he said, ما على ظهرها من أحد لا يخاف على إيمانه أن يذهب إلا ذهب. There is no person on the face of the earth who doesn't fear losing his iman except that he will lose his iman. And if you're not afraid of losing the most valuable thing that you have, your purpose for existence, which is to believe in Allah and to worship Allah, your cause of actual joy and happiness in life, if you're not afraid of losing it and you don't safeguard and protect it, then you should be afraid. تَذْهَبَ بِهِ جُمْلَةً وَأَنْتَ لَا تَشْعُرُ, as Ibn Qayyim says here. And a person should be afraid that this type of mentality and these types of harmful, destructive thoughts may take all of his iman and his love of Allah away without even realizing it. السابع, the seventh of the 10 things, أن تعلم أن تلك الخواتر بمنزلة الحب الذي يلقى للطائر ليصاد به. بِمَنْزِلَةِ الْحَبِّ الَّذِي يُلْقَى لِلطَّائِرِ لِيُصَادَ بِهِ. He said, knowing and understanding that such thoughts are like bait that is cast to catch a bird. Person, they have a piece of, or they have a pellet, a seed to catch a mouse or to catch a bird or something of the sort in order to attract the animal that you are trying to catch. You have to have a seed or a pellet or something of the sort to capture what you are hunting. And these thoughts are like that. They are like that pellet. They are like that seed that is used to capture a bird or used to capture an animal. They are like the bait. This is the bait. This is the bait that the shaitan uses to capture. He says, فَعَلَمْ أَنَّ كُلَّ خَاطِرٍ مِنْهَا فَهُوَ حَبَّةٌ فِي فَخٍ مَنْصُوبٍ لِصَيْدِهَا وَأَنْتَ لَا تَشْعُرُ. You must be aware that every thought of this kind, every harmful, destructive thought of this kind is like a pellet in a trap that is set to catch you. Yet you are unaware of it. You don't realize that at the onset. When this thought comes to your mind, you don't realize the purpose of why this has come to your mind, that your own self is your enemy. The shaitan is your enemy, and if yourself is left without adab, without ta'deeb, if yourself is left without mujahada, without waging war against it and fighting against it and taming it and training it, and so on and so forth, then it will destroy you, and the shaitan will be given authority over your heart in accordance to how much you are left unchecked and your thoughts are left unchecked. الثامن, the eighth, أن تعلم أن تلك الخواتر الرديئة لا تجتمع هي وخواتر الإيمان والدواعي المحبة والإنابة أصل. That you know that these bad thoughts cannot coexist whatsoever at the same time with thoughts of faith, dawa'i al-mahabba, and the reasons that you love Allah, and your inaba, you're turning to Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. A person cannot think about both of these things at the same time. One is going to have to give way. If a person, and he fights the mental battle, or fights the spiritual battle within, when these types of thoughts come to mind, by remembering their religion, by remembering Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, thinking of the greatness of Allah, making isti'adha, all the sorts of things that a person does, there may be a short conflict, and either one is going to go or the other. Either one is going to go or the other. One is going to dominate and result in action, or the other is going to result in action. And it's not just a one-time thing, obviously, that a person loses and that's the end of everything for them. But rather in a single hour, Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, and he explains in various writings that a person fi sa'atin wahida, in a single hour, in a short span of time, wins some and loses some. The iman in their heart against their nafs, and the angel against and the malak against the shaitan, and this war that happens within the heart of a person, ala maydan al-qalb, on the battlefield of the heart, and it alternates in fortunes. You win some and you lose some. You win some and you lose some. However, they cannot coexist at the same time. They cannot coexist at the same time. بل هي ضدها من كل وجه. Rather, these harmful thoughts, they are the opposites of the thoughts of iman in every way and from every aspect. وما اجتمعا في قلب إلا وغلب أحدهما صاحبه وأخرجه. And they cannot exist in the same heart without one of these types of thoughts overpowering the other, وأخرج, and driving the other type of thought out, واستوطن مكانه, and taking its place. فما ظن بقلب غلبت خواتر النفس والشيطان فيه خواتر الإيمان والمحبة والمعرفة فأخرجتها واستوطن مكانها. What would you think to be the condition of a heart where the thoughts that come from the self and the shaitan ultimately overpower the thoughts that are connected to a person's iman, their belief and their faith, and their mahabba, their love of Allah, and their ma'rifah, their knowledge about Allah and His religion, and drive their correct thoughts out and their beliefs out and so on and so forth and take their place. لكن لو كان للقلب حياة لشعر بألم ذلك وأحس بمصيبته. And the answer to this question is, what do you think of a heart that is like that? How do you think that heart feels? And the answer is quite simply, الهم والغم والحزن. الهم والغم والحزن. الهموم الغموم الأحزان. And these are, Ibn Qayyim in his book Al-Fawaid, he said these are the arsh of shaitan ala qalb al-abd. Al-ham wal-gham wal-huzn. They are the seat of authority of the shaitan over the heart of the servant. When he controls the heart of the servant and takes it over with destructive thoughts, destructive beliefs and so on and so forth, then the heart is dominated by sadness and worry and sorrow and anxiety and so on and so forth. And it's no wonder that people today, despite having more creature comforts and wealth, so on and so forth, than people ever had in the past, are more depressed and miserable and sad than any people have ever been in the history of mankind, and Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala knows best. التاسع, the ninth, أن يعلم أن تلك الخواتر بحر من بحور الخيال لا ساحل له. فإذا دخل القلب في خمرته غرق فيه وتاه في ظلماته فيطلب الخلاص منه. Ninthly, that you know that such harmful thoughts, they are like an ocean of fantasy without any shore. They are an ocean of fantasy without any shore. And they are a shoreless ocean. And of pure imagination, speculation, and fantasy that have no basis in reality. They have no basis in reality. They have no good for you and no basis in reality. He said if the heart enters into the depths of these thoughts, then it will drown and it will get lost in its darkness, seeking salvation and finding no way. That's how today's world is. Pick your poison. And all the means of destruction that people have, and in the entertainment industry, binge watching movies and shows and so on and so forth. People living in a world of fantasy, people living vicariously through imaginary, fictional characters, so on and so forth. Muslim youth, unfortunately, spending hours on end, gaming, playing video games, so on and so forth. There's no sabah, and they are in a state where they are not attending to anything that will benefit them financially, that will help them provide for a family, help them be an adult in the future. They are not working for anything that will bring them close to Allah, prepare them for the hereafter. And people today, they find themselves more than any other time before, and with the advent of technology and these various industries connected to the fantasies of people. And in this description that Ibn Qayyim mentions here, more than any other time, in an ocean of fantasy that has no shore, if the heart enters into the depths of this, it drowns and it gets lost in its darkness. And it will seek salvation and will find no way out. A heart that is dominated by such thoughts is far from success. It will find itself mu'addab. It will find itself tormented. Mu'addab mashghulun bima la yufid. Will find itself in a tormented condition and preoccupied with what is of no benefit. Al-ashir wal-akhir, the 10th and the last means of hifd al-khawatir, which is from the asbab istiqamat al-qalb, and from the means to bring about istiqamah in the worship of the heart, and the uprightness and steadfastness in one's spiritual journey. أن تلك الخواتر هي وادي الحمقاء وأماني الجاهلين فلا تثمر لصاحبها إلا الندامة والخزي. Know that such thoughts are the valley of fools and the wishful thinking of the ignorant. It's pure imagination, and he has no basis in reality. And that a person being consumed with such thoughts and letting such thoughts govern their behavior, so on and so forth, it is the valley of hamqa, of idiots and fools. And it is the wishful thinking of the ignorant that has no basis in reality. It produces nothing but regret and disgrace for the person who harbors such thoughts without fighting them. فإذا غلبت على القلب أورثته الوساوس وعزلته عن سلطانه وأفسدت عليه رعيته أي جوارحه رعيته وألقته في الأسر الطويل. When these thoughts overpower the heart, then they give rise to the whisperings of the shaitan. They remove the sultan, the authority of the heart, so the heart cannot do what it was created for, which is to have good understanding and good intentions, and to love what is beneficial for it in this world and the next, and to hate what is harmful in this world and the next. And he loses his authority. It corrupts its subjects, meaning that, when the heart loses its authority, its subjects become corrupt. The subjects of the heart are the eyes, the ears, the tongue, the limbs, the body of the person. And he no longer work when the heart is dead or the heart is sick. These subjects become corrupt, and the thoughts of the person, al-qatu fil asr al-tawil, throw the heart into long-lasting captivity. And then Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, skipping forward just a short time, a couple pages after this, he says, Athani, once a person gets their thoughts together, and the second matter is sidq at-ta'ahub li liqa'i Allahi azza wa jal, is that a person genuinely prepares, that they ready themselves to meet Allah azza wa jal. وهذا من أنفع ما للعبد وأبلغه في حصول استقامته. And this is among the most beneficial and exhaustive means for a servant to attain uprightness, and their belief in Allah and their belief in the meeting with Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, so they prepare to meet Allah and walk upon and take that sayr in Allah wa darul akhirah, that journey upon the path, the straight path of Islam that leads to Allah and the hereafter. They genuinely prepare to meet Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. فَإِنَّ مَنْ اسْتَعَدَّ لِلِقَاءِ اللَّهِ انْقَطَعَ قَلْبُهُ عَنَ الدُّنْيَا وَمَطَالِبِهَا. Because the person who genuinely prepares for meeting Allah will find his heart disconnected and detached from the world and the pursuits of this world. وَخَمَدَتْ مِنْ نَفْسِهِ نِيرَانُ شَهَوَاتٍ, and will have the fires of his passions extinguished. وَأَخْبَتَ قَلْبُهُ إِلَى رَبِّهِ تَبَارَكَ وَتَعَالَى, and his heart will be humble before his Lord تبارك وتعالى. وَأَكَفَتْ هِمَّتُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ وَعَلَى مَحَبَّتِهِ وَإِيثَارِ مَرْضَاتِهِ, and his aspirations and his ambitions will focus upon Allah and his love of Allah and preferring the good pleasure of Allah above everything else. وَاسْتَحْدَثَ هِمَّةً أُخْرَى وَعِلْمًا أُخْرَى, which constantly develops within him a new resolve and new knowledge within him. وَوُلِدَ وِلَادَةً أُخْرَى, and he is then born again. He undergoes a new birth. نسبة قلبه فيها إلى الدار الآخرة كنسبة جسمه إلى هذه الدار بعد أن كان في بطن أمه. So when he puts his mind right, and he genuinely starts to prepare to meet Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, which is the result of his iman and his belief, then he is born again. And he is born again. And this is our response to the Nasara. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he quotes here in the next paragraph, as is attributed to Isa ibn Maryam alayhi salatu wasalam, that he said, إِنَّكُمْ لَن تَلِجُوا مَلَكُوتَ السَّمَاءِ حَتَّى تُولَدُوا مَرَّتَيْنِ, that you will, O children of Israel, O children of Israel, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven until you are born again. This is being born again. Being born again is that you get your mind right, that your mind is no longer the captive of your nafs or the shaitan or anybody, that your mind has proper beliefs, and that you genuinely prepare to meet Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. You become a person of good understanding and a person of himmatun aliyah, of high lofty ambition, pursuing the reward of Allah in the hereafter, and to be protected from the punishment of Allah in the hereafter, pursuing the good of this world, and pursuing any protection from harm in this world by following the religion of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, has guidance for all of our affairs. He says when the person is born again, the orientation of his heart is towards the hereafter, just as his body is oriented towards this world after he was in the womb of his mother. He becomes reoriented when he is born again. Now he has a proper mindset, and this proper mindset and tasawwur, this proper conceptualization of how reality is, His proper mindset by protecting his thought brings about any التأهب الاستعداد any همة عالية, high ambition in preparing for the hereafter. High ambition for preparing for the hereafter. And it is like he is born again. And that waking up, as Ibn Qayyim elsewhere in his writings, he calls it al-yaqadha. Al-yaqadha, waking up. Wakes up. It's like he can see for the first time. It's like he can see for the first time. And when he gets this epiphany and he gets this wake-up call, he wakes up to the reality of the affair, then his body becomes oriented towards the hereafter in the way that his body became oriented towards this world when he came from the womb of his mother. And his heart experiences a real birth. فَيُولَدُ قَلْبُهُ وِلَادَةً حَقِيقِيَّةً. And his heart experiences a real birth. كَمَا وُلِدَ جِسْمُهُ حَقِيقَةً. Just as his body did when he came from the womb of his mother. وَكَمَا كَانَ بَطْنُ أُمِّهِ حِجَابًا لِجِسْمِهِ عَنْ هَذِهِ الدَّارِ هَكَذَا نَفْسُهُ وَهَوَاهُ حِجَابٌ لِقَلْبِهِ عَنَ الدَّارِ الْآخِرَةِ. We'll close on this point. And just as the womb of his mother, when he was a fetus, was a veil that separated his body from this world, then likewise his nafs, his self, and his desires are a hijab, they are a veil that separates his heart from the hereafter. They need to be pulled away. You have to step away from your desires and step away from your nafs, and you have to wake up. And all of this is min thamarat al-iman wal-aqidat al-sahiha ala al-qalbi al-akhlaq. We ask Allah tabarak wa ta'ala to make us of those يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه إنه سميع قريب مجيب وصلى اللهم وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Did I go past my time?